All right, so we have two different pieces of Nintendo Switch 2 information to discuss today, one of which is related to the massive leak that hit the Pokemon Company and actually gives us some more or less concrete evidence that even internally, this system, the Switch 2 that is set up for backwards compatibility, and that's just obviously what Nintendo's going to do. If you were looking for any more proof than previous insiders we've had, like Nate the Hate, claim that yes, developers have backwards compatibility and are currently testing it. We heard that far back. Nate also came back online later on and just said Switch 2 has backwards compatibility flat out. We've also seen accessory manufacturers confirm it, and I've even been talking about this feature likely being involved in the Switch 2 since we had that interview with the Ubisoft CEO, and when talking about Sparks of Hope and how it struggled on the Nintendo Switch in terms of sales, he just flat out said in the interview that they'll continue to update the game and continue to sell it on Nintendo Switch 2. Now, he could have been talking about a port and re-releasing it, but it very much seemed like his plan was just to update the Switch 1 game and try to market it for the next gen console, insinuating that backwards compatibility will be a thing. So we're going to walk through that piece of information first. Then the other piece of info comes to us from Dr. Trentendo, and there's a lot of mystery and confusion around this individual because if you look at their predictions on things, they are an analyst. They don't get things right a lot. They missed with the Nintendo Switch Pro reports, which of course internally very well may have been a thing, and I am a believer that it was once planned, and probably the pandemic messed that up for Nintendo when it comes to their chip supply. But you can look at this individual's predictions and just flat out say that they've been wrong about a lot of stuff, but one particular style of teases that they have done over the course of history have all proven to have some credence to them, because while they were just related to the Legend of Zelda franchise, they were multiple announcements that Nintendo had not confirmed, and this individual did give us a hint or tease ahead of time. So that individual chiming in with a Nintendo Switch 2 tease definitely got the internet talking, and we're going to break down the validity of it and the track record here today. So we'll get on the same page with all of this. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first discuss the more concrete information we have to go over today that does come to us from the legit Giga Leak, Terra Leak, whatever you want to call it, that hit the Pokemon Company. Massive amounts of data that was not supposed to get out there got out there, and we've of course learned about some unannounced Pokemon game projects. We've also learned about the fact that Gen 10 will indeed be developed for Ounce, the codename of the Switch 2, and with that codename confirmation, it also seems like Nintendo might be planning a re-release of Breath of the Wild on their next gen platform with that 4K 60 FPS and no load times like we saw from the claims of the Gamescom 2023 behind closed doors presentation. So lots of interesting information coming out of this Terra Leak, if you will. But one piece of info that I first saw pop up over on RGT85's channel, so shout out to him. This is the first place I saw this information being shared online. He highlighted this post from Central Leaks, which does outline how the Switch 2 is handling its file format, which is very telling for backwards compatibility support, or at least it should be. As you can see, Ounce Switch 2 seems to be using the same tools and ROM format Nintendo currently uses for Switch 1. ROMs are still NSPs, but obviously they have new encryption keys that only Nintendo has. So that is an interesting tidbit of information, because if Nintendo is trying to optimize for games working seamlessly from their previous gen hardware to their next generation hardware, keeping the same file format and similar tools and all of those things in place would be an expected move for them to do. However, it might also lead some credence to the idea that we now might know the reason that Nintendo has been so aggressively going after the emulation scene just recently, because keep in mind, while we've seen massive leaks over the course of the Nintendo Switch generation, I mean, essentially all of their games that come out physically leak online a week to 2 weeks, sometimes as far out as 3 weeks in advance, because we're seeing not the game dumped online yet from what I can tell for Mario and Luigi Brothership, but there's people floating around images of them being able to play the game online that seem legit. I mean, these leaks are kind of ridiculous for Nintendo, and they definitely don't like them happening. And what happens is when somebody does get the cartridge early and they dump the files online, of course, everybody starts to share said files on torrent websites, and next thing you know, you have a whole community of players up and running playing those games early on emulators. Obviously, Nintendo does not want to carry this problem forward that has plagued them so bad in the Nintendo Switch's generation with them to the Nintendo Switch 2's generation. So you might question, why are they using the same file format if they are afraid of that? And the answer might be to support backwards compatibility, but that might also be part of the reason why they are aggressively trying to shut down all of the popular emulators that are out there for Switch 1 today. And while I'm assuming the encryption keys and different security measures would be in place to stop the piracy from being so easy to do on Nintendo's next-gen console, it is still very telling that if they're keeping these things the same at their core, that backwards compatibility is going to be there out of the gate. And I'm even thinking with this Breath of the Wild story that we were talking about, that U-King-O, the apparent internal code name, and this comes from a source that leaked a bunch of other code names that all turned out to be correct. It seems like that's going to be a real project that Nintendo works on. And would they just re-release Breath of the Wild, or are they going to do some kind of upgrade path for their Switch 1 games that sold very well, where people who already purchased the game can do a $10 upgrade, similar to what we're seeing Sony do with some of their major seller back catalog that they want to give another chance to sell on the PS5. They release a native version for their just next gen console, upres the textures and do some more work to things, and then they give a $10 upgrade path for people who already have the game, like Last of Us Part 2 or Horizon Zero Dawn, and it's an extra way for them to drive some incremental revenue at the end of the day. And would Nintendo do that with some select titles? That internal code name might be referencing that, it might not, but between this information, insiders speaking on it, and all of the other CEO interviews and things that I've mentioned, there's just too much data on the table for me to not believe that backwards compatibility is just a day one feature for this next gen hardware. So that's obviously great news, but then to get into more of the speculation talk around when we might see Nintendo Switch 2 revealed, and this got stirred up online once again because Dr. Suriken Toto just took to the internet to make kind of a tease tweet where he said the following, and it's just Switch 2 in quotation marks. And you might dismiss that immediately and say, why even bother bringing this up? Some analyst online is throwing out the name Switch 2. Is that because it's internal information and he knows Switch 2? Is that because he's just poking fun at how on edge all the Nintendo fans are for a reveal of this console right now? Or does this somehow line up with a prior track record? Because as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if you look at him writing up articles and him sharing his predictions on what he thinks Nintendo will do, that is very different than when he's doing these teases that he has some kind of internal information, it ends up being true, and then he goes back and deletes the old tweet after it has been proved correct. Because you can actually trace this all the way back to Tears of the Kingdom in 2021, where of course at that point in time we didn't know the title of the game, it was just the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Dr. Suriken Toto in a now deleted tweet did say Z2 2022, and that was before the June Nintendo Direct that we saw air shortly thereafterward. And we of course at the end of that trailer saw the 2022 planned launch year revealed to us, which at that point in time, of course, that didn't end up happening. We saw the delay news, but that was the actual plan for Nintendo to go forward with Tears of the Kingdom and launch it in 2022. Well, then you fast forward to the end of 2023, and Dr. Suriken Toto also made a similar formatted tweet where he said ZR 2023, and the internet blew up with, once again, Zelda remake and remaster rumors, because maybe that's what the R stands for. Well, it turns out it might have meant Zelda revealed. That's what the general internet consensus is right now. But while we did not get a game announcement of any form, we actually saw shortly thereafter the official reveal of the Legend of Zelda movie and the plans to go ahead with that as a live action film that we now know to expect in the future. So both of Dr. Suriken Toto's tweets in the past were clearly teasing something he had inside knowledge on, and they came to fruition shortly after his tease. Now, that does not make me put all the stock in the world that he's for sure going to have this one right, and that the Nintendo Switch 2 is indeed the name of the next gen hardware, even though we have some leaks potentially from Foxconn employees suggesting that. I'll let you decide how credible that is, but you also just can't dismiss it and say this person has zero track record, because this is very different from his predictions and speculation talk that he writes up in articles. Because if he does have inside information, he's not going to be allowed to report on it as somebody in the gaming industry. He's not going to be able to post a direct blog post on his website with everything he knows and all of the inside knowledge. That's not how it works. So a cryptic tweet and then you delete it afterwards kind of seems to be his go-to move when he does have some kind of inside info. So obviously we have to wait and see if this tease from him bears any fruit, but we're in that countdown window where essentially we have between now and November 5th for the potential of a Nintendo Switch 2 reveal. If we do not see it by November 5th, when Nintendo holds their next shareholders meeting, I will be fully on Team 2025, obviously at that point in time. I don't think they mess with the holiday season with a reveal of their next gen hardware. towards the end or even the middle of November. I think that gets too late, and we're likely looking at a January or even a February, March time reveal, which means the console will obviously come out later into 2025. However, if there ever was a prime time for Nintendo to do something with a Switch 2 reveal, it is now. We saw them skip the Nintendo Direct in September. We've seen them get all of their media coverage essentially out of the way for Mario and Luigi Brothership, going live a lot earlier with hands-on previews than they typically do for their release cadence when it comes to new games. And it's just essentially been a silent month other than things going on with Nintendo Switch Online like we've been talking about. So it's very possible a reveal does hit at the end of this month. It's also possible it doesn't. So you can't set all your hopes, dreams, and expectations on it, but obviously I'm going to be a fan of Nintendo finally revealing this thing so we can look at some concrete evidence, see what the console looks like and what its feature lineup will be. And I'm willing to bet money at this point that backwards compatibility is going to be that day one feature for the console like we've been expecting this whole time. So I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. What do you make of both the different stories? Are you happy to see yet another piece of information, this time internally straight from the Pokemon company, that it seems like backwards compatibility is a go for the next gen Nintendo hardware? And how would you feel if all of this was wrong and there just wasn't backwards compatibility? Would there be a deal breaker situation for you involved at that point and you wouldn't pick up their next gen console? And do you think that there's any hope that Nintendo Switch 2 is revealed towards the end of this month or the very beginning of November? And are you on the same page with me that if we go past November 5th, it's likely not happening this year at all? And finally, if you don't want to type out a bunch of different stuff, just type in Team 2024 or 2025 for the console reveal in the comments to let me know where you fall on all of it. So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.